What if I told you that securely attached people feel insecure and triggered too? What if I told you that feeling jealous or anxious can actually be normal? I used to believe that if I was truly secure, if I was truly healed, if I really loved myself, I wouldn't feel triggered, that I wouldn't need reassurance, that I wouldn't feel anxious. But those aren't necessarily signs of secure attachment. And they can actually be disconnection in disguise. Another way we shame ourselves for being human. In today's episode, we're digging into what healthy, secure attachment actually looks like, why it's okay if you still get triggered sometimes, and how to move towards a more secure relationship with yourself. Welcome to Unwind, the podcast that helps you get out of your head and back into your heart. I'm your host, Blair Nicole, and I'm a PhD candidate in psychology, former trauma therapist, and self-compassion coach. This is your space to slow down, tune in, and rewrite the stories that are no longer serving you. So, I used to think that healing meant I would eventually arrive at this magical place where I wouldn't feel triggered or insecure anymore, where I'd be fully healed, confident all the time, and never feel jealous or need reassurance again. I believed that those were feelings that were negative or bad and something that I needed to get rid of. Spoiler alert, that's not at all what happened. And paradoxically, learning how to be okay with those feelings is what actually helped me become more secure. First things first, your feelings, behaviors, and relationships always make sense based on the context of your lived experience. There's nothing inherently wrong with you if you're struggling with insecurity or anxiety. If you've been through trauma, if you've learned that love had to be earned or that people couldn't be trusted, or if your parents modeled relationship behaviors that were destructive or unhealthy, then of course your nervous system responds the way it does. Of course you have certain patterns and responses. That's not pathology. That's survival and adaptation. There is nothing inherently wrong with you. This is just what you've learned. And what's learned can also be unlearned. Secondly, so many of the messages we get in society about relationships and self-love actually keep us stuck and reinforce some level of dysfunction. We're constantly fed messages like, there's no room for jealousy in relationships. If you really loved yourself, you wouldn't need reassurance. Ultra independence is sexy. If something is triggering you, cut it off. But here's the thing. Secure attachment isn't about repressing your needs, completely eliminating triggers, or bypassing your emotions. It's about learning to honor them without abandoning yourself or demanding someone else fix them for you. Even now, with years of therapy, training, and deep self-work, I still get triggered sometimes. I still feel insecure in certain moments, and I still need reassurance here and there. The difference is, I don't abandon myself anymore when those feelings show up. I don't shame myself for having these feelings. I don't consider the feelings to be bad or negative. They're just part of being human. And instead of trying to numb them or outsource them to someone else, I can stay with myself. I can ask for what I need without shame. I can show myself compassion. And when someone else can't show up for me in a certain moment, I can still hold myself through that experience. That's what secure attachment and healthy self-love actually looks like. But that's not what most of us are taught. In fact, some of the worst advice I've ever received was from well-meaning therapists and recovery spaces like CODA, Codependence Anonymous, 12 Steps, where I kept hearing things like, detach with love, or just stay in your lane. And listen, I totally get the intent behind that advice. I understand why people are sharing that. And no shame to anyone who finds value in those spaces. If that works for you, great. But something about it always felt off to me. It didn't sit right watching people swing from total enmeshment to complete detachment or avoidance, as if disconnection or ultra independence was the goal. It didn't feel quite right to watch people pathologize totally normal human experiences like insecurity or jealousy, or pathologize a desire for connection. Don't get me wrong, I had my stuff that I needed to work through in relationships. I did struggle to let go of control. I did struggle with people pleasing, and I loved to fix people. So the way I was showing up wasn't working, and I knew that. But I also instinctively knew that just going to the other extreme wasn't the answer either. I knew that shaming myself or labeling these experiences as bad wasn't really going to solve the problem. And when I was training to be a therapist and diving deeper into attachment theory, I realized that I wasn't wrong to question it. There was actually a lot of science to back up what I was already sensing. The truth is, humans are wired for connection. We need closeness. Connections with others is healthy. Secure attachment and healthy self love doesn't mean detaching from people or never needing reassurance or having to do life all alone. It means detaching from controlling these things and staying connected to yourself in the process. And when we allow ourselves to have a full range of emotions, instead of trying to get rid of them, including the ones that might be unpleasant, that's when healing truly happens. Yes, learning the nuance of healthy connection and emotional openness is way more difficult than swinging from one extreme to the other. It's much easier to just detach, avoid, or repress. But that's not where healing happens. Real healing happens in the messy, complicated middle. And that's exactly what I teach inside my self-paced online course, Becoming the Love of Your Life. You can find the link to that in the show notes or learn more on my website, blairnicole.blog. But if you've ever thought, if I were secure, I wouldn't feel this way. If I were confident, I wouldn't need reassurance. If I just learned to detach with love, I wouldn't be so hurt. I see you. I've been there myself so many times. And I want you to know there is nothing wrong with you. The process of healing attachment insecurity is often oversimplified, unrealistic, and honestly, some of these misconceptions can be harmful and keep us stuck. You can be a deeply grounded, self-loving, secure person and still feel scared sometimes, still feel the sting of rejection, still want closeness and comfort. The difference is, now you'll know how to stay with yourself through it. You don't try to get rid of those feelings, and you have compassion for yourself through the process. And that's what makes all the difference. In part 2, we'll go deeper into what secure attachment actually looks like compared to insecure attachment, and how to start moving toward it, even if it's still messy sometimes. If you're tired of feeling insecure or like you're never good enough, especially in love and relationships, this is for you. Becoming the Love of Your Life is a self-paced course designed to help you stop chasing love and validation from people who can't give it to you and start building real self-acceptance, confidence, and self-love from within. You'll learn how to break the cycle of insecurity and finally feel safe, accepted, and good enough from the inside out. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about realizing there was never anything wrong with you to begin with. Learn more at blairnicole.blog/coaching or click the link in the show notes. So maybe by now you're thinking, okay, I get that secure people still get triggered. I can accept that feelings like jealousy aren't bad. That actually makes me feel seen. But now I'm also kind of confused. If everyone gets triggered, then what actually makes someone insecure versus secure? And this is such a great question. You're not alone in asking it. The topic is nuanced, and most of what we're taught about it oversimplifies things to the point of being unhelpful and confusing. So first, let's drop the all or nothing thinking. Secure versus insecure is not a light switch. It's more like a spectrum. And we all move up and down on it depending on who we're with, how regulated we are, and how safe we feel inside ourselves. You might feel totally grounded and secure in one relationship and deeply anxious in another. You might feel fine most days, but spiral when something touches an old wound. That doesn't make you flawed, that makes you human. So, if I'm being honest, I don't love the terminology secure versus insecure because it's kind of an all or nothing proposition. But for the sake of making it easy, I will continue to use this terminology just to make things simple. But I did want to let you know where I'm coming from. So, what's the difference between someone who's deeply secure in themselves and their relationships versus someone who isn't? Well, it all comes down to your relationship with yourself. Are you connected or disconnected from yourself? And there's no shame or judgment either way. At some points in my life, I have been massively disconnected from myself because I needed to be in order to survive, and because I hadn't learned how to show up for myself in any other way. So if that's you, it's okay. It's something that can be learned and cultivated over time. None of these feelings or responses are inherently bad, but it's important to realize that our ability to be present with ourselves and how we respond to ourselves when we're feeling triggered or insecure is also going to be the template for how we show up in relationships with others. It's about realizing that how we respond to ourselves when we're feeling unsafe, uncertain, or vulnerable is super important. When we're unable to be present with ourselves and our experiences, it can start to look like insecure attachment that shows up in some of these ways. Maybe you abandon your own needs while chasing someone else's approval, or you numb out or repress emotions instead of feeling what's actually there. You might outsource your sense of safety and love to someone else, shame yourself for being triggered instead of meeting yourself with compassion. Or it could look like repressing emotions, overthinking, fixing others, people pleasing, self sabotage, chasing unavailable people, pushing people away. The list goes on. None of these things are because there's something wrong with you, they're just because they were once adaptive strategies. You learned those behaviors to survive, to cope, to get by, and there's no shame in that. But healing happens when we learn a new way. So, let's break this down with a few real world examples. Here's what it can actually look like in scenarios you might have dealt with, plus some tips on how to move forward towards a more secure attachment with yourself. Scenario 1. Maybe you struggle to set boundaries. This is something so many people struggle with, myself included. And it's actually natural and protective to struggle with boundaries from an evolutionary standpoint, because we don't want to be rejected or pushed out of the group for survival reasons. But it can be self-defeating, so let's look at how this shows up. If you're someone who struggles with insecurity or insecure attachment, you might say yes when you want to say no. You might overextend, overcommit, and then feel resentful or drained later. Sometimes you might avoid setting a boundary because you don't want to upset someone, or you're afraid they'll leave if you do. None of these things mean you're weak. They just mean you've learned that people-pleasing felt safer than rocking the boat. If you're someone who has a more secure attachment style, you might respond by checking in with yourself first. You would allow space to ask yourself, what do I need in this moment or this scenario? And then you would communicate that with honesty and care. You're not trying to control how others react. You're simply being responsible for your own energy and your own peace. So, if you're finding yourself more on the insecure side of this, here's how you can start to move towards a more secure relationship with boundaries. Start noticing where you abandon your own needs to stay liked or easy to be around. Check in with yourself. Maybe even ask, what am I afraid would happen if I set this boundary? Sit with yourself through those emotions and then practice small, non-defensive ways of expressing your limits to others. Boundaries aren't mean, they're just how we stay connected without losing ourselves. Another situation that may be coming up is constantly seeking reassurance. Seeking reassurance isn't bad, but if we're doing it to an extent that's impacting our relationships or well-being, or if it's creating a cycle where we're pushing people away because of it, it might be time to look at our relationship to reassurance. So the insecure response to this might be you find yourself needing constant validation and reassurance, maybe from a partner, a boss, a best friend. And when things feel uncertain, you reach out, sometimes repeatedly, in order to make yourself feel better. And when that person can't respond to you with reassurance, you feel worse. Or sometimes maybe the reassurance doesn't actually help at all. Remember, this isn't about you being too much. It's just your nervous system doing what it was taught to seek safety through connection instead of within yourself. The secure alternative to this would be you still value connection and need reassurance sometimes, but it's not your only source of safety. You can hold space for your own uncertainty, stay present with yourself when you feel discomfort or anxiety, soothe yourself, and then once you've done these things, you can ask for support from others in a clear and grounded way. If you're noticing that you are falling more on the insecure side of this, you can move towards a more secure relationship with seeking reassurance by validating your need for connection instead of shaming it. Gently practice meeting yourself halfway and trying to give yourself what you need first before turning outward. If you need love, acceptance, a hug, or reassurance, try offering it to yourself first. Basically, you're reparenting yourself. Remember, this is not an either-or situation, it's both and. We need to show up for ourselves first, and it's still okay to want connection and reassurance from others. Another example that you may have had come up is getting triggered. As I've said, everyone gets triggered. The goal isn't to get rid of them completely. It's learning how to relate to them in a different way. So, an insecure response to triggers often looks like something happens, maybe a tone of voice, a changed plan, a moment of disconnection, and suddenly you're flooded with emotion. You're overwhelmed and you might react. Maybe you lash out, shut down, or go into fix-it mode. You make someone else responsible for fixing the trigger. Or you try to shut it down because you don't know how to sit with it yet. This is just what happens when unresolved pain meets the present moment. And it's okay, it makes sense. But there is another way forward. A more secure response would be, you still feel the trigger, but you slow down. You're able to be with yourself as you experience it. You name it, you respond with presence instead of panic. And if you do get hijacked or do something you don't feel good about, you're able to repair without spiraling into shame. So the trigger doesn't go away, you just know how to meet it with presence. So moving forward, if you want to have a more secure relationship with triggers, instead of trying to get rid of them, try being present with them with curiosity and compassion. Ask yourself, what is this part of me afraid of? Or what does this moment remind me of? Triggers are always messengers, and the more we learn to listen to them, the more they'll soften over time. These are just a few examples of how this might be showing up in your life, but the common theme is it's okay to feel this way. Even if you're healing, even if you're becoming more secure every day, you might still get triggered, you might still get anxious, you might still feel insecure, and that's okay. It just means you're human. The more you can be present with yourself and learn to meet your needs, instead of always outsourcing them, and the more you can learn to welcome all of your parts, not just the healed ones, the more secure you'll become. That's exactly what we practice inside Becoming the Love of Your Life. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming someone you can count on. It's about becoming the safe person you've always needed. Someone who knows how to stay with herself no matter what. And that's the paradox. The more you stop trying to outrun triggers and insecurity, and the more you start opening to these emotions with non-judgment and self-compassion, the more secure you'll actually become. Thanks for tuning in to Unwind, the podcast that helps you get out of your head and back into your heart. If you loved this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who needs it. If you want to go deeper, you can get free immersive meditations at blairnicole.blog/unwind. You can explore online coaching programs at blairnicole.blog/coaching. And you can grab my book, 31 Days of Self-Compassion, on Amazon to start building a habit of self-compassion one day at a time. Everything I create is designed to help you remember you are enough, and you already have everything you need within you to heal. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.